So, Nivedita, you notice we went through interesting times. Uh, I managed to control Kanpur and Lucknow and Allahabad, where problems had arisen. Took me a day or two. Once my officers, brigade commanders, and battalion commanders understood that they are not slave to the criminal procedure code as per the law, and that as a citizen of India, you have certain duties and rights besides responsibilities. And if you do that, it's very difficult for any law to catch you, especially if your motive is correct. The motive has to be correct. There has to be no anger. There has to be no revenge. There has to be sure decision as to how to act when things blow up. Now, mark you, that's going to happen again and again in this world. You can see there are a lot of problems in this world, and they're going to happen in India also. Therefore, all of us citizens must understand that as long as you don't have a personal advantage in doing something, but you're doing it for the sake of the nation, you'll be able to do whatever you have to do to control things. And that's it. We didn't kill anyone, but we threatened, and that was enough. The military is a very powerful force, and it's so powerful and so well organized and so disciplined that once they understand what the orders are down the line, everybody acts in a similar way. And the police conforms, and the bureaucracy also conforms. It requires a lead. I had this in my career again and again as we go on in life. Whatever it is, these lessons were learned because of the assassination of Indira Gandhi. Now in Mathura, we settled down after a while. And I think I was commanding that corps for about a year and 10 months. Nowadays, generals are not allowed to command more than 9 or 10 months. I commanded for almost 20 months. And I disagree with the business of moving officers for their personal career quickly from command to command so that they get the experience to go up in higher rank. Yeah, should not become an officer-oriented army. We have to be a troops-oriented army. And if the officers don't get certain advantages in their career, so be it. But we cannot change formations too fast because it takes time for the Jawans in a formation, in a corps or a division or a brigade or even for that matter, a unit. If the commanding officers are changed too fast, you don't even understand who the hell it was before the next man has landed up. Nonetheless, having finished the command, I ran a very big exercise for this corps where we exercised the armor division in Jhansi and in Jalon district of UP and crossed Ganga river with our tanks and things like that. And Air Force had a good go at us. And the army chief was Vaidya. He also came to see this exercise. We had a paradrop to exercise ourselves. As a one corps commander, I was placed under operational duties of Northern Command. Northern Command was Lieutenant General Mohanlal Shibbar, very good friend of mine, because he had commanded one corps when I was the BGS. Now he's an army commander. He's the man who got the Siachen Glacier for us, for instance. And he asked me to come and visit him. He visited me in Mathura, and he asked me to visit him in Udhampur in J&K, where his headquarters was, to decide on the operational method of employing my corps. But then what I noticed is that the army commanders who were defending certain tracts of territory on the western border, eastern border, northern border, they they are required to defend. Therefore, when offensive forces like one corps is an offensive corps, is meant to ingress into enemy territory, When an offensive corps comes into their sector for operations, they want to beef up the defensive position so that their own operations are successful and maintain the dignity of defense. So I came to the conclusion that we need in our country an army commander level officer who's offensive in his mind. He has to attack across the border. So I raised the question to General Veja, who I must have told you earlier in the history that General Veja and I knew each other since I was a captain and he was a major. This is the luck of the draw. And I came as a major general to command armored division. I was the colonel here, so I was his right hand man. We did a number of exercises together. Are you there? You disappeared. So, and I was, I could talk to him freely. So I told him, I said, I don't like going under Northern Command or Western Command for various operational areas because they use me to beef up their own defense rather than let me do what I want to do for attacking the enemy. It's a different ball game. You want to concentrate in a different way and you want to act in a different way. You don't want to be disturbed looking after territory. You're wanting the enemy to look after his territory so that when you punch him, you get inside his territory. I gave this analogy later in life to even the Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh later. I said in boxing, if you stand in a corner with your arms up like this, the other guy bashing you up, I mean, that's you may defend yourself, but there's no method of winning or of stopping that man. You have to lead a punch. You have to lead a hard punch where it hurts most. So that the guy realizes that you're not going to be lying down there getting beaten up, you're going to give it back. Even if you get thrashed afterwards, there's no harm in being thrashed, but you've got to give it back. So that was my principle throughout, which I learned in Sherwood College when I was a kid. You got to give it back. And no bully, especially a big bully, likes to get a nasty punch from a small little puny fellow. If you take China, for instance, if they get a punch from India, I mean, they'll get what is known as a black face, kala muh, which the Chinese don't like. So they have to be careful. Right. So I spoke to the chief. I said, we need an army commander to be offensive in his attitude. Now, he started the ball rolling, but after him, General Sundarji took over. After Sundarji, I took over. After the Rodrigues took over. It was about three chiefs by the time this came into being. Because, government doesn't have enough money and you got to, if you have an offensive command, that much extra fund, etc., are required, which they are doing slowly as they gain. It's so important to have a big treasure chest before you can have the type of military that you want. And now we are confronting the Chinese on the northern border. So first thing you need is a good economy. Because if you don't have a good economy, how can you have all these? Neither the weapons nor the equipment nor the manpower. There's a big drain on government resources for keeping a strong, well-trained, well-equipped military. It's a lot of expense. Therefore, one has to be wise enough in the military also to understand that the ball game is that you cannot have a system where the economy is disturbed too much. You must allow the economy to become better and better. Then you can have whatever you want in the military, not otherwise. So anyway, that was my command of one corps. Was a fascinating command. I had the opportunity to visit the east, where I had not been before. I've been to Ranchi earlier, but I wanted to visit my artillery brigade, which is based in Ranchi. And I had a very interesting brigade there, Maharashtrian gentleman, high-class Brahmin type. And he asked me, I wanted to visit his unit in Gopalpur Sea on the eastern Bay of Bengal coast, which is anti-aircraft artillery. So I had to go to Bhubaneswar. So I ended up in Bhubaneswar, and I had got a 2 days program, but he insisted I should have 3 days. And he decided on the third day, couldn't understand what he wanted me to do for an extra day, but he put me in a five-star hotel where nobody charged me any money. And the governor was informed by him, Governor Orissa, that I was coming, and I'm a mere lieutenant general, very common or garden form of life available in India. But nonetheless, they gave me a lot of respect and regard. Governor had to be called to Delhi for something. So he left his guide, his, his state guide, and his own car for the use of myself to go to Konarak and to Jagannath Puri temples on the east coast. And now Konarak is a lot of history of India. You know, right from the days of the great Kalinga kingdoms and Ashoka the Great and so on, they're all Orissa, Bihar based. See? So India was a major trading port from Konarak. There's a sun temple over there, most excellently constructed, huge, meaning I got official guide explained everything. And then I went to the Jagannath Puri Mandir, which is supposed to be the great. The word in English called Jaggernaut comes from Jagannath because they have that Rath Yatra once a year. Millions of people are involved. And so to go to that temple, I must give it to them and the arrangements of that brigadier of mine that all the Pandits received me. There's such a massive crowd over there. They said, I said, do I have to give any money to anyone? They said, no, you keep your purse away. In case your purse is made of leather, you must not enter the temple. So that had to be put away. He says, you don't have to pay anything to anyone. You have to just do the darshan of the Lord, do the inner holy areas of the temple. And millions of people coming. So there were 8 or 9 of these fat pandits surrounding the brigadier and myself. We walked through the passage without any human being permitted to touch us because of this ring of pandits, fat fellows, all of them. And we went to the Holy of Holies, and normally people are not allowed more than a second to view the altar. I was told that you are here, you can spend as much time as you like, because we will stop the queues and say that the Lord is having his food. See, so I spent about 20 minutes and observed did a parikrama there, and put some money down there, which I wanted to. Then they took me to an outer area overlooking the sea, one part of the temple, where there was a Pandit waiting for me with all the books. He wanted to know my caste, my subcaste, my family name, and he gave me took out the books where my great grandfather had visited, my grandfather had visited, writing everybody's name, and then my father had visited. See, and now I have. So he said, put the names of all your children and put the names of your wife and so on. So it's a sort of a record which is unimaginable in a massive country like ours, where every human being's forebears who have visited these temples, the full record is maintained. I don't know if you've experienced that. It's all over the country. It's in Rameshwaram in South India, for instance. I'm sure it is in Calcutta in a number of big temples, and Bilur Mutt and all that. And it's in Kashmir, and it's in Jagannath Puri, it's in Dwarka, it's in, very impressive. So you know that there was a chap called Adi Shankara, 4th or 5th century AD, who converted whole of India from Buddhism back to Vedanta, right? And he died at the age of 34 or so, but he written Upanishads and he written so many things. And he's traveled all over India. And he's got a Shankaracharya hill in Srinagar, which is revered by the Muslims and the Hindus and everybody, you see. So he said that there are 4 pilgrimages that the Char Dham, 4 pilgrimages that every good Hindu has to do before he crosses the Great Sea to be in heaven forever. And out of these 4, there's Badrinath in the north, Rameshwaram in the south. This is on the near the Dhanushkodi coast, from where the Lord Ram and Hanuman were supposed to have led their armies to Lanka. Jagannath Puri in the east, and Dwarka in the west. Now, Dwarka in the west has been raided. The Somnath temple and other temples have been raided by Mahmud Ghaznavi and others to loot the riches thereof. But after the raid, they are not built up again. And it will take time for the tribal hordes of Afghanistan to understand there's more to life than just looting other people, isn't it? So we are supposed to do all these 4 dhams, and I think in my service, without much effort on my part, but due to others, I have done the 3 dhams, but done by me by the time I retired from the army, and the 4th dham in Dwarka was done by Ashok and Rashmi when they took me there a year and a half ago, 2 years back. Just as the COVID was starting, we went to Dwarka. So I completed my 4 dhams. And now, whether it's right or wrong, if you look at the practical side of it, if Adi Shankara laid us down on the 4th, who took him seriously, how do they carry out these dhams? If you are living in Kerala or Calcutta or someplace and you want to go to these dhams, in those days, 4th century AD, there were no railway lines, there were no trains, there were no aircraft, there were no motor transport. You had to walk. Or if you were rich enough, you had a horse or a chariot. You had to stop every so many kilometers after a day's movement for the night somewhere where people would host you and toast you and look after you for the night and feed you up, send you on your journey the next day as a pilgrim, right? So if you ask yourself the question, why is India one country? I raised this question earlier when I was a major in the staff college. Why is India one country? And it's going to remain. Nobody can change it. It's because of this. It's that people have been moving from north, south, east, and west to carry out these religious pilgrimages. Right? With the result, they get to know the various dialects and tribes and differences and accept them. It's such a variety of human beings and cultures. Every 10, 20 kilometers you go in this country, the culture changes. And if you see this, I mean, it's amazing how this country has been brought together. We are not necessarily religiously bound to each other, but the fact that we know each other and have respect for the different type of cultures means that we do desire to be in one country, right? So I just wanted to convey that, which I experienced as one corps commander. I even went to visit a brigade of mine in Badrinath, Badrinath area, that's the Joshimath area of the Garhwal Himalaya, because the Chinese have an open border there with us, and there were some difficulties there. I went to the source of the Ganga and took a helicopter and flew over the area where the so-called border between us and Tibet is required to exist, and to see what sort of terrain it was and what was one supposed to do in case there was an ingress there. My brigade commander who was conducting me, he said, you first go to Badrinath, the temple. And I found that the priests over there belong to Kerala. And I went to the big temple in Bombay, well, not Bombay, but in Rameshwaram. All the priests belong to the Himalayan, the Garhwal Hills. And the priests of Dwarka are really the priests in Jagannath Puri. And the Jagannath Puri Pandits are in Dwarka. So I think Adi Shankara or Shankara Acharya was a great guy. He did a lot for binding this country together and converting it from Buddhism of Ashoka the Great to Vedanta. Well, anyway, we accept all religions now, so no more of that. So you'll notice that as a one corps commander in the 1 year and some 10 months that I was there, I think there was not only a large amount of military development in my mind, but also a personal development, also perhaps a spiritual development. also a very determined desire to do what is right, whether everybody likes it or not. Now, of course, you may raise a question. What you think is right may not be what somebody else thinks is right. So, what is the consensus in this? The consensus is the Constitution of India and the Supreme Court. That's the consensus. So we follow what they do, right? So that was my command of one. Now, uh, when I was in the MO directorate, there were couple of things I wanted to highlight that happened there also. In addition to what I've been telling you, we had an organization called the JPC, Joint Committee of Officers of the Major General level rank. So our Lieutenant General of the Military Operation Directions was the chairman, but he seldom attended. So I used to attend in his place. So I was a Major General, and there was a Major General level officer from the Air Force and Navy attending the meetings. And from the Air Force, we had a Air Vice Marshal Mehra, Polly Mehra. And from the Navy, we had Rear Admiral Hiranandan. Now, why I mention this is that is the level at which you are dealing with the other two services. And we became very good friends. So when you want to deal with another service, they've got different rules, different things, different methods of doing things. With the Chief of Defense Staff, you are trying to get them together a bit. But personal relationships are very, very important indeed. And this personal relation well, because as luck would have it, out of the three of us, I became the Army Chief and Polly Mehra became the Air Chief at the same time. And Hiranandani became the Navy Vice Chief. More of that later when we did certain operations together, because once you know each other so well, it's a much easier method of coordination between the three services than it would be otherwise. Now, mark you, this coordination business is a difficult proposition, even in Western countries. It's a difficult proposition in England. It is a difficult proposition in America, where each military service has its own ideas as to what it should do and how it should do. And other two services may not agree with that particular line of action. So it requires a lot of coordination. And it has to be a coordination between the military and the army and the air force. But if a coastal area is involved, then all three services get involved. See, so for efficiency of military action, you do need a very close coordination between these three organizations. I had already told you about the aeroplane flights, which were not being permitted by the Air Force to become a military unit. But after this episode of the Sikh resurrection and the fact that we had to get aeroplane flight to fly by the orders of the Prime Minister, we put that case forward. I was the author of that case, and I took a lot of assistance from American military aviation, army aviation, from British Army aviation, we knew the officers. They all had to struggle against the respective air forces to get a military air wing, you see. And then from the Navy, which managed to get the fleet air arm, you had a lot of assistance even to help me make the drafts, etc., of that paper. So eventually got it through Mr. Venkataraman, who was then Defense Minister and later became the President of India. Right? And again, here, I must tell you that Mr. Venkataraman and I became friends because he visited Sikkim when I was commanding the division there. And I wanted to take him up to the Nathula post, which is about 14,200 feet. But on the way, they said snow. It was getting on closer to winter. I mean, it was November or so. And there's huge snow drifts that we had to cross. So we had some infantry platoon guiding us from the Nathula picket. They said that, look, we'll have to take time to clear this snow. So I asked one of them, I said, do you think a mule or a horse would be able to get through this. They say, yes, probably yes. It depends on how deep the snow is. You see? So we said, if the snow is about 2-3 feet deep, you couldn't work out how deep it was on the track. So then the horse can move his legs and we will get across. So I told Mr. Venkatraman, who was then, I think, he was the finance minister, he was about to become the defense minister. I said, you hang on, you follow me, let me go first. Because if something has to be tried out, the senior officer should try. So I went a bit, but in the first few feet of the snowdrift, it was all right. But after I proceeded to the a couple of yards, the snow was much deeper. It came up to the neck of the horse, so the poor horse was floundering away. And so both the horse and I had to be rescued by the infantry platoon there and brought back. And so Mr. Venkatraman couldn't help laughing away. He said, General, you gave a fine example of horsemanship and you couldn't even get across the snowdrift. So I said, well, that's the luck of the draw. But in the event, he could not visit the picket. Later, he became Minister of Defense. And when I went to him with this aeroplane case, he started laughing at me. He says, you're the guy who got stuck on the horse in the middle of a snowdrift. Anyway, he accepted the paper, so that was the main point. And in fact, when he became president and I was the chief, he used to invite Surupi and me over every week to the Rashtrapati Bhavan for one of the shows or a cinema or something or the other thing. Which means that politicians also are human beings. You have to, break the ice, as one might say. But you break the ice, then you can speak freely and also act freely. Uh, you know, in Mathura, a lot of trains were being attacked. So going from Punjab to Delhi and Delhi to other places. And we had an armored corps Sardarji captain who was proceeding from Amritsar to Ahmednagar for a course of instruction in in tanks. He was going to do a tank driving and maintenance course. And when the train arrived from Delhi to Mathura Junction, I was informed by the military picket that we had at the railway station and the railway transport officer that there are a number of military dead bodies on this train. So we landed up there to examine the train and we found this captain was in the first class compartment. It had been entered on the way by somebody, by a horde of people who had stopped the train in between and murdered this man. So he was lying dead. There were some soldiers, Sikh soldiers also. But when they came into the soldiers' compartment, because the other Hindu soldiers and Muslim soldiers were there, they hid these guys under the seats, etc. And when the crowd came there and said, hand over the Sikhs, they said, they're no Sikhs. So it goes to show how communities help each other, despite the idiocy of what's going on against a particular community. Anyway, I wanted to make an example of this. So I said, it shall be a public funeral that we will do of this captain. I did it in the middle of the town. And I made arrangements with the loudspeaker to everybody in the town, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, everybody will come and attend this. And since we're a little afraid of what the Lieutenant General was going to do next, so they obeyed orders and they all came there. And we had a full military funeral for this man, with the guard of honor and bugles blowing and all that sort of thing, and burnt him, carried him to the guard with this crowd following, and in front of everybody, we burnt him. And the crowd had to be informed. Life will carry on as before, and you will respect every religion and its customs. If somebody be murdered by you, well, all right, or by somebody else, you will attend the funeral and give him respect so that you sort the equation out. And there's sort of actions that were required. Supi and I learned a lot of lessons, not only from the point of view of military men, but from the point of view of military ladies and their children. How they get affected and how they have an opinion and how they control the views of their husbands. You see, by nagging them every day at the house. So both sides have to be controlled to create peace and quiet. This lesson was taught by us, by Surupi and me, when I later went and took command of the College of Combat. Now, our constitution is very well written. Many people complain about. Many people, many thousands have never looked at it. They just take the word for it or whatever it's supposed to be. But if you study it, it is very well, carefully done. And there were a lot of discussions in the Constituent Assembly in 1946 and 47 before it was finally adopted. And the chairman of the Constituent Assembly was Ambedkar, who was a Dalit, who had self-educated himself. We have to give a lot of respect to this culture. This respect means that the rule of law has to prevail. And everyone, including the military or armed police or whoever they are, must understand that this rule of law is interpreted by the Supreme Court or the High Court, and you have to hear what those people have to say. There's a lot of talk on the side, oh, there's corruption here, there's corruption there, but in the end, you will notice that if there is any major question to be decided, it is very carefully thought of and very carefully decided as per the law and as per the Constitution. And if, as long as we do agree to respect and obey this Constitution, I think there's a great future for this country. These are lessons learned in one. Now, by the time I'd done 1 year and 20 minutes, 1 year and 10 months or so, I got my posting orders. And I was asked to take over the College of Combat. The College of Combat is a training institution in Mao, MHOW, near Indore. And it's known as Army War College now.
Yeah.
It's a Lieutenant General.
I was in Indore, so I went to Mo.
Yeah. So we do give a we do give a degree for a 1 year's course there of the University of Indore, MPhil degree for that course of instruction. It's a full year's course. And I landed up there in Mao. And we had got Vikram married, so family was doing well. And we had got Lotika married a little later here in Delhi. So Surupi and I had completed our so-called responsibilities for the 3 children. And in Mao, I took over the College of Combat. It was a training institution where I lasted about a year and a few months. Now we had students from abroad also. We had students from Ghana and from Nigeria and from various African countries. We had students from Indonesia. We had students of various other courses in Mao. I mean, there's a major's course, there's a lieutenant colonel's course, and young officers courses, tactical courses. I must say that this area was started after partition as the infantry school, where tactical training was given to infantry at the company commander level and the battalion commander. That is the source of it. And the officers who came here wrote précis and pamphlets for every subject of military art, which was studied by the students and passed. Eventually, those became army training manuals, you see. So I must give it that those officers of the Indian Army and for that matter, earlier British Army, British Indian Army, who had fought World War II and had experienced battle, they were made instructors there, and we took very high quality officers to command these institutions. Like, for instance, Sam Manekshaw, who became our chief, has also commanded the infantry school in Mao, because you wanted high quality officers to train young officers. Now, I must accentuate the question of training. You see, you can be whatever you like as far as military command is concerned, but command comes perhaps a little later in life when you become more senior. But right from the beginning, the company commander, platoon commander, and that level of fighting area must be very heavily well trained because they are the ones who train the men. And there is no show in this because if your tactics at the platoon and company and battalion level are good, it's very easy to command the army. But what happens is that people start dreaming about becoming senior officers and thinking of higher type of use of the military. They forget that the crux of the military is down there. The tank troop and the platoon and the company commander, how they function. Many times, senior officers make plans. I described this to you during the 65 and 71 wars that we fought, and also the various operations in J&K, counterinsurgency operations in Nagaland and Mizoram. It's the junior tactics which count. If you notice in the Ukraine and Russian war, why is it lasted so long? Is because the tactics was not good. It was not correct. The cooperation between infantry and tanks and the way combat is done at the ground level was not looked at. You see, so I think all militaries in the world must pay a lot of attention to junior tactics, as it is known as. It's the crux of the business. So infantry school mount does that at the junior level. That means that captains and majors level. Then this course, higher command course, which I took special interest in, is when a person has commanded a battalion and now he's getting to become a brigadier or something. So you want to train him on a slightly higher level, where instead of just commanding a company or a battalion of infantry, he's thinking of 3 or 4 battalions under the brigade, for instance. How would a divisional commander think where he has 9 infantry battalions, plus artillery, plus supply services and repair services and medical services and everything, and artillery all under one command? So these courses are extremely good. And I think that the Indian Army training is among the best in the world. Foreign officers come here and get trained very happily. Uh, in the College of Combat also, we do actual training of our students there in the higher command course. Because the art of command at the higher level is very different to the art of command at a unit level. For instance, a lieutenant colonel or a colonel commanding a battalion is doing one method of tactics, but once you get higher up, it's a very different views on how things are important, how are they to be done. We take actual terrain, for instance, the terrain between India and China, the high mountain regions, the terrain between India and Pakistan, and both in the Kashmir region, plus in the plains and the desert, the terrain on the eastern border with Burma, with the jungle terrain, with mountainous territory, and insurgency areas. And we do actual exercises in those areas, you see, so that people get used to the borders of India and how it is to be managed. That's why when I took over the College of Combat, I uh, I was asked by military training director to receive an officer, Major General rank from the British Army, who was the commandant of the Staff College at Cambridge. We were similar to our Staff College in Wellington. In fact, we have copied them. He had been asked that since the Indians have started a higher command course above the Staff College, so go and have a look to what they're doing and start something for Britain also. So he came after getting sanction from Army headquarters. And he was sitting with me and he said, could I see the syllabus of your high command course? I said, see the syllabus? So he says it's the same as a normal staff college level, except that it's staff college you're teaching majors. And now you're teaching colonels who have already commanded battalions. There's no difference, it's slightly higher level. I said, no, this is, he said, so therefore I'd like to send 2 British officers to attend this course. I said, I'm sorry, the higher command course is a confidential course. We don't allow foreigners to come for this. Junior courses, they can come, at the